Let's welcome in John Champion for a little bit of extra banter. John, welcome back. I know there's been a lot of news floating around in the world of football. Let's start with the French League. The Prime Minister saying that the first two divisions aren't going to play at least until August. What is that ripple effect around Western Europe?
Well, it's one of a number of ripples which are threatening to become tidal waves if France, the Netherlands, Belgium are setting the tone for the continent. But are they? That's the big question at the moment, because set against that, you've got Italy saying, look, we're just starting to ease our lockdown, and we think it's really critically important to the reopening and rehabilitation of our country, our society, and our economy that Serie A returns as quickly as possible if it's safe for that to happen. So the sports minister made wide-ranging comments yesterday encouraging the Serie A authorities to look at coming back. We know that Germany are ahead of the curve in so many respects. They are waiting for an announcement later this week following governmental meetings that could lead to a resumption of the Bundesliga as soon as a week on Saturday. Personally, I think that's unlikely. I think it might be 1, if not 2 weeks beyond that. Maybe May the 23rd is the date we're looking at for that. And in England, we have Project Restart, which is the Premier League's not very clever or mysterious code word for looking at getting the Premier League going again. It's very much encouraged by Boris Johnson, now back at work after his scare with coronavirus, and by the wider government as a whole. They see it as integral to the feeling of well-being being restored in the United Kingdom, that the Premier League is up and running. And so they're looking possibly at a return on the 8th of June. Again, I think it's somewhat optimistic, but it is at least a signpost that they're now setting dates with a bit of optimism rather than merely hanging dates in the wind and hoping that it might be somewhere approximating to when they get back. And encouragingly, we now have small groups of players back at the training grounds of Arsenal, Brighton and West Ham over the past 3 days. And that is encouraging other clubs to follow suit. And the thought is that by mid-May, group training will also possibly be permitted. So you set France in one corner, together with the Netherlands and Belgium. In the other, you have the corner of hope, which is Germany, Italy. Spain haven't said a great deal, but their sentiment is very much with the Italians, and the Premier League as well. So there is hope and plenty of it. Let's not think that France have sounded the death knell for the resumption of football within Europe. One final point on this, without being too long-winded, we should be aware that UEFA have said they want to know from all the constituent leagues what's happening by the 25th of May. And the chair of the FIFA Medical Committee, Michel Doug, a vastly experienced Belgian doctor, has put in his 10 pence today by saying that he doesn't believe, as a medic, that any country should be playing in Europe for the rest of what would have been this season. It should all be shelved, and they should start again in September. So still, lots of discordant views.
John, real quick, though, if the Champions League continues, does that mean the French clubs don't participate then?
No, I think it means that Lyon, for example, who are still in the Champions League, would have to play their games. I mean, it's the wrong phrase at the moment, but in isolation from anything else. It would be the only games they would play. Okay. That seems to be the theory at the moment.
Okay, so over here, over the last 72 to, I'd say 48 hours especially, here we go again. Inter Miami, rumors, James Rodriguez. But you're hearing there may be more of a likely move where he moves to England as opposed to the United States.
Well, his many agents are working super hard, from what I hear, to find him a landing spot. And I think Everton are emerging as possible front runners for his services. The idea of working alongside Carlo Ancelotti certainly appeals. And they are one of the few clubs who are sufficiently financially strong, even in these trying times, to think of making 1 or 2 marquee acquisitions. And he would fit their profile perfectly.
Let's stay in England. I can't find anything transparent about this. You obviously this week on Banter are going to give us a little bit more insight on it, but we're going to talk about DeAndre Yedlin, his future at Newcastle, but the new ownership group coming into Newcastle, is there a possibility that may fall through?
There is a possibility. There's mounting political pressure in England at the moment on the Premier League to reconsider their decision to wave this through, which habitually they do. Basically, if you're rich enough, you're good enough to own a Premier League club. That's been historically the case. They do have a fit and proper owners and directors test, but no one's quite sure what the criteria are. And it tends to be malleable, so they can fit it to their needs. So they can give even suspect owners in terms of human rights or business dealings in the past a green card to take over a club. But on this occasion, there are so many Saudi Arabian forces and feelings out there which are being brought to bear on the Premier League, not least beIN Sports, one of the biggest global broadcasters of Premier League football in many territories, whose output has been pirated, they say, by an organisation effectively backed by the Saudis over the last 3 or 4 years. So they're paying these huge rights fees. Their product is being pirated. They're not seeing the full benefit of their investment. So on that business front, they have gone to the Premier League and said, look, please don't let this happen. Then you've got the forces subject to human rights violations around the world, the charities and indeed the organisations that try and defend human rights in Saudi Arabia, saying, look, this is not a fit and proper ownership for a grand club of English football. So it's a question now of whether the government actually gets involved and says up to the Premier League, taps them on the shoulder and says, where is your conscience on this? And at the moment, it's teetering on the edge between government intervention or not.
Speaking of teetering on the edge, is your finger still attached to your hand?
It's still there at the moment, Taylor. I can't speak for it in another half hour. It's less attached than it was 2 hours ago, that's for certain. Thanks for your
John,
by the way.
John, good hearing from you, pal. Talk
and you.
Soon.
All the best.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN Plus.